Hey there, in this lesson we're going to be talking about primary sources, author's attitude, and author's purpose. So to start off, what are primary sources? Well, primary sources are original documents from whatever time period you happen to be studying. So for example, if you are studying the time of the Constitution, a primary source would be the Constitution itself. So, for example, primary sources are things like diaries and journals that people wrote, speeches and interviews, literature from the time period you're studying, maps from the time period you're studying, and even artifacts like furniture or clothing. Anything that is an actual artifact source from the time period you're studying. Primary sources are the best out of all the sources you can have because, first, they were present during the actual experience. They offer insight about the experience. People writing in their journal would give you insight about how life was like, for example. Also, they haven't been changed or interpreted by other people. You're literally the closest to the experience that you can get. For example, if you wanted to know what happened last Saturday night at your friend's house, you'd want to ask your friends who were involved, not your friend's sister's boyfriend who heard it from other people. So think back to our question. What sources would be best to find an answer to that question? How did people live? It is primary, like I said, because you do want the source to be as close as possible. If you were to ask a teacher, that would be tertiary, because your teacher probably read a textbook in college, and then they're telling you about the textbook. There are 3 things removed from the actual source. Wikipedia would be tertiary. Same thing, people posting things about textbooks or secondary sources, so it's a 3rd source. History book would be secondary. They look at the primary documents and then tell you about them. And maps and journals and all those other examples would be primary. You want to have primary sources. And in this lesson, we're going to only be looking at primary sources from the time of the colonists. So, what should you be thinking of while reading a primary document? What should you be doing? Well, the first thing you should think about is the author's purpose while writing that. So, what do I mean by author's purpose? I mean answering the question, why did they write it? So, for example, a private journal is different than a newspaper article. Well, why? Because the purpose is different. A private journal is something that's only for that person versus a newspaper article that's for the public. If you were to write about your summer, your last summer, in your private journal, you're probably going to include different things and write about it differently than if you were going to write a newspaper article. So just like I said, author's purpose affects the content shared in the document and the words that you use to share it. The next thing you need to think about when reading our primary sources in this lesson are author's attitude. It's very important while reading primary sources. It can help you learn about the time period that you're learning about. So you need to think about what is the author's attitude about the content. One way to do this is look at their word choice. What types of words are they using to describe the content? How are they describing it? You can learn what their opinion is almost about the content from the words that they're using. That's author's attitude. So, while you're reading in this lesson, you need to ask yourself these 3 questions. What can I learn about the culture of the time period from this source that I'm reading, this primary source? What is the author's attitude in this primary source, and what can that tell me about the culture and the author itself? And also, what is the author's purpose while writing this document? Was it to entertain? Was it to inform? Was it to persuade someone? What format was it in? Was it a letter? Was it a journal? Was it a newspaper article? All of those things you need to be thinking of while reading the primary sources in this lesson.